Microsoft's making some huge, unprecedented bets in 2026. Have they bitten off more than they can chew? Or is the future for Microsoft and its customers, you, as bright as Satya Nadella, its CEO, paints it? Let's see. I'm Barry Briggs from Directions on Microsoft, your authoritative source for all things Microsoft Enterprise Software, cost management, and licensing. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about the awesome challenges and opportunities that Microsoft and its customers face in 2026. And let's face it, number one on the list is AI. Microsoft is all in. For the first time in its history, they're a first mover in a major technology paradigm shift. Now, they claim with no small amount of justification that AI is driving a new industrial revolution. Satya has said this himself on numerous occasions, and so has Mustafa, the CEO of the AI division. It's a profound statement. And frankly, I believe he may be right. But let's pause for just a moment and remember that such an industrial revolution, if it's true, comes with huge societal changes, upheaval even. Now, for those who lead, England and the US in the 1800s, arguably the United States and China today, clear winners' benefits accrue. In the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution led to consumer goods, cities and towns, a higher standard of living, but also had clearly negative effects, pollution, child labor, and so on. So if this is indeed an industrial revolution, be prepared for everything to change. But hey, as we all know, getting from vision and marketing messages to execution is no small thing. I mean, wouldn't it be just great if we could hit F5 on your keyboard and the vision translated into action? Well, that's not the case. So when we say Microsoft is all in, what do we mean? Let's break down their strategy, see how they're executing, and see what challenges they must overcome. When we examine Microsoft's AI strategy from, let's say, a stratospheric level, we can roughly see that it constitutes three broad layers, each one of which comes with its own challenges. Now, at the top, the UI layer, if you will, there are the copilots. The challenge there is driving adoption of this premium feature. Microsoft can benefit from a well-understood go-to-market channel, but yet, as we'll see, challenges abound. And the next layer is the transformation of the enterprise application. That is, it's a transformation of the core architecture of all enterprise applications based on AI. This will no doubt take years, and Microsoft again will leverage its strengths in the developer community. On the other hand, this change, as we'll see, is a huge tectonic one. And finally, at the bottom is a wholly net new challenge for Microsoft, building these massive data centers dedicated solely to AI. They're spending huge amounts of money. Will this investment pay off? Let's dive into each of these a little deeper. Now, it probably comes to no surprise as anyone these days that Microsoft is facing challenges in broad-scale Copilot adoption. Customers who were originally quite enthusiastic and willing to pay the $30 per user per month premium struggled early on to find ROI. The Copilots in Microsoft 365 hallucinated. They were wrong as often as not. And people began to question whether an AI assistant in Word or Excel or PowerPoint was really a good idea. I think there were a number of reasons for this, honestly. The models that the original Copilots were based on were immature. They didn't understand the underlying object model of the application. They didn't understand the user's intent. They raised security concerns. Could they see data that they weren't supposed to? And so on. And so overall, it's possible that the Copilots were released too early. And rumor has it that quotas were reduced. Microsoft denies this, but honestly, it wouldn't be all that surprising. That said, in my view, the way that Copilots become entrenched is through their use of connectors to enterprise data sources and applications. And perhaps we're in a bit of a trough of disillusionment right now, But once Copilots leverage all the data and logic throughout the ecosystem, they'll be successful. Of course, this will take time, and there's probably a lot of consulting dollars in the process of all of this. But becoming connected to the enterprise ecosystem and a vital part of it is the way that Copilots will become successful. Let's take an example. So here we've used Copilot Studio to build a very simple agent that coordinates office moves. Now what it does here is it identifies the employees that are affected, sends out notifications, it allocates move costs to the appropriate manager, and then sends a summary to the manager when the report is complete, or when the move is complete. And you'll see that it talks to different enterprise applications through connectors, it talks to Microsoft applications through the Graph API, and so on. And here, the Copilot has actually become an integral part of the enterprise ecosystem. The second challenge, the middle one in our stack diagram a few slides ago, is about the radical change to the enterprise application model. Now, this is what Microsoft is proposing replaces older application models. Remember, we've had the three-tier model of enterprise applications. We've had microservice-based web applications and so on and so on. This is what Microsoft says will change all that. Now, you may recall that a year ago, we extrapolated from some of Microsoft's comments that the new application model comes in 4 layers. We like stack diagrams. The UI or Copilot layer, the language model-based agents, which comprise the business logic, the data layer, and specialized hardware to run the models. Now, this architecture stack hasn't changed, but we are seeing a lot more detail. Lots of product-specific copilots, ways to build your own copilots, ways to build and manage fleets of agents, a semantic layer to extract knowledge from your data, plus ways to govern your data. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Partnering with third-party leaders in the data management space, Snowflake and Databricks. White-hot competition between Databricks, Snowflake, and Fabric. And lastly, huge investments in data structure infrastructure to support all this. Now, stepping back a little bit, what Microsoft is proposing here is a wholly new way to build applications. It is visionary. It is transformative. And to be clear, it's kind of a bet for Microsoft. Now, in my view, this will probably take decades for this transformation to occur, if it happens at all. But just like three-tier and microservices and Kubernetes and container-based apps and blah, 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 all before this, maybe what Microsoft is proposing is a North Star that we developers can work toward incrementally and step by step. We've had North Stars before. They were all very influential. None of them were, I would say, completely and pervasively adopted, but they were useful. Now, a key way Microsoft is seeking to achieve their AI goals is with an unprecedented amount of capital expenditure. No question, it's brute force. In fiscal 2025, ending in September, $80 billion. In 2026, it's estimated they'll fork out some $110 billion. And with it, they're building both new AI factories, as they call them, as well as supporting cloud computing for enterprises globally. Now, the Fairwater sites in Atlanta and Wisconsin are purpose-built for bare metal AI compute with hundreds of thousands of NVIDIA GPUs for training and inferencing to support OpenAI and their own AI workloads. And at the same time, they're growing their global data center footprint, both to support growing cloud demand, as well as for data sovereignty and isolation requirements and regulations in specific geographies. It's a lot. Now, all this raises a number of questions. Is innovation going much faster than CapEx can keep up? i.e., will all this new stuff that's coming out make these massive investments obsolete? And will Microsoft be able to balance the needs of OpenAI against the needs of its traditional customers, whom Satya curiously calls the long tail of enterprise computing? So especially if the financial environment tightens, Microsoft may face difficult investment choices. How will they prioritize their investment spending? You are the long tail of enterprise computing. You must help Microsoft stay focused on your needs. Challenge 4, enterprise data. Now, the success of AI in the enterprise, and therefore Microsoft's success with AI, absolutely depends upon well-governed data estates. Data, of course, is the fuel upon which AI consumes. But look, over the past few years, storage in the cloud has gotten really, really cheap. So what did we do? We filled it up with redundant, obsolete, trivial, incorrect, siloed data. And there are often hundreds or even thousands of data stores in the typical large enterprise. Which one holds the authoritative information for a given customer? How did it get there? Is it current? Is it protected properly? What other data stores have it, and are they correct? And just to illustrate this a little bit more, here we've moved from a fairly canonical enterprise data architecture. This is what we had, 20 years ago or so. Not all that dissimilar to the 3-tier enterprise application we used to have back then as well, to something far more complex. Structured and unstructured, clickstream, streaming data, different technologies, different vendors, warehouses, lakehouses, data lakes, and so on, all in an attempt to rationalize it all. And Microsoft has recognized that data governance is a big challenge for customers, and therefore for them. And over the past few years, they've released a suite of tools and services in this area. Now, if you're interested in Purview in a lot more detail, I actually did a webcast on Microsoft data governance a few months ago. And if you're a member of Directions on Microsoft, my colleague has a number of detailed and interesting reports. Suffice it to say, however, data governance overall, protecting your data, managing your data, labeling the data, encrypting it, ensuring it's not exfiltrated and so on, this continues to be a big area of investment for Microsoft. Now, I should point out that it's not just tools. It's people and processes that across the entire organization that help with data governance. You need accountable individuals who will drive the training, the metrics, and the tools that will make it happen. It is truly a grand challenge for enterprises today, and the health of the data estate is something that you and your colleagues can never take your eye off of. Now, another piece of the data challenge is turning data into knowledge, illuminating the core data elements, the things of your enterprise, like customer, product, and so on, and how they relate to one another, and the history or memory, as it's called, of how they relate and how they've been used. That's kind of what a knowledge graph is. And a knowledge graph can be quite useful. Microsoft brands these new features IQ. And you can see on the left an example of how they work. Here's a customer who hasn't signed a contract. Why? Well, we ask Microsoft 365, and Work IQ, which runs on that, can tell us that the customer is responding slower than usual. Customer mentioned competitors in the last email, and our SE on site mentioned that they had encountered a technical blocker in adoption of our stuff. And so on. We can ask Fabric IQ for pipeline metrics and some information from the customer model. And we can ask Foundry IQ, which is talking to third-party data sources, about competitor intelligence and so on. And finally, from all that, our agent can now mark the customer at risk of high risk of attrition, maybe even prepare a discounted offer and so forth. Now, this sort of thing is a hot area right now. Palantir has a wholly separate meta model based on what they call objects, kinetic actions, dynamics, security, and compliance. Celonis looks at process artifacts and discovers all the hidden tacit processes that you may have or may not even know about, and so on. And I call these top-down approaches. They're imposing models on the data, whereas Microsoft leverages existing resources in Graph API, Power BI, and Azure AI Search. Which is better? Too early to tell. It's a rapidly evolving space. The IQs are brand new, just announced at Ignite. So we'll see how well they're adopted and used. But extracting knowledge from data is a clear evolutionary step in the development of enterprise data and apps. And the goal of all of this, the holy grail, if you will, is the enterprise digital twin. You know, back in the day, in my role as CTO for Microsoft's own IT unit, I used to say that the job of IT was to give control of the business to the business with as little friction as possible. After all, it's their business. But back then, with the technology of the day, there was only so much we could do. Only now are we starting to see what might be possible for a CEO to go to a conversational AI-driven UI and ask about modeling profitability, or for a factory manager to understand what maintenance might be needed in the next few months, or for a manager to understand why margins dropped, and so on. So the key insight here is that, as we've seen, extraordinary value can be extracted from our enterprise data estates. And the holy grail here, the North Star, if to change metaphors, is the creation of these digital twins. But it's going to require a lot of investment from both Microsoft and from customers in order to get it. Okay, moving on to challenge 5, and switching gears a little bit. Where are the traditional businesses going? And all is there stormy weather ahead for Windows and Microsoft 365 and all this AI hoopla? Is Microsoft ignoring them? Let's talk about Windows first. You know, Windows market share, as we all know, has probably not unexpectedly tumbled in the past decade or so, but it still rules the desktop, if not by much as it once did. Still, with, let's just say, muted fanfare, Microsoft introduced a little over a year ago the Copilot Plus PC, easy for me to say. And hey, Copilot, so far this hasn't rekindled interest, and other attempts to add AI into Windows haven't been exciting. Windows continues want to be the developer's choice, but nearly everything DevDiv, the developer division, produces, except for Visual Studio, is open source, kind of diluting the developer value. In the cloud, the majority of cloud workloads are Linux, which to some extent is reducing Windows Server to legacy. And back on the client again, nobody's enforcing any discipline, as they do on the Mac among app builders. On the Mac, all your apps are in the applications folder. In Windows, who knows where they are? And yes, that's a bit of a sore point for me. One bright spot I will say in Windows is the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's an area where they've done a lot of innovation and allows Windows to run Linux OSs and applications, which in turn does make Windows a nice choice for cloud application development. And in the Microsoft 365 space, all of a sudden, seemingly, we're seeing AI tools that can kind of do what the Office applications do. Claude Skills and Google's Notebook LM and Microsoft's own Copilot Pages can read and write Office file formats. And so you begin to wonder, are these AIs disintermediating the Office application UI? I think not, actually. I've heard these rumors of doom and gloom for Microsoft 365, and frankly, I don't believe them, at least not yet. Here's why. Microsoft is as much a platform these days as it is a set of applications. And for many, the platform features for compliance and security, Purview and Defender, are, not to mention the directory, Entra, these things are all indispensable infrastructure. In fact, I would argue they may be even more important than the apps themselves. So it's indispensable, but there is a problem with this thesis. And that is that Microsoft is putting pretty much all the new platform features where? In the most expensive tier of Microsoft 365, E5. And there are rumors of an E7. We'll see. The question is, will customers accept them? I don't think so. I don't think there's danger in the near term. I think it's not likely that in the next few years, enterprises lessen their dependence on Office or Microsoft 365. But we will see lots of new ways to build content. And you should expect to see Microsoft continue to aggressively move customers to these higher tier E5 and maybe even higher tier Microsoft 365 offerings. Challenge 6, well, our last challenge. Many of you know that Microsoft is radically limiting who can get an enterprise agreement, an EA, and they're moving the majority of their corporate customers to the Microsoft Customer Agreement, the MCA. And let me just say, I won't read all the bullets here, but let me just say this is fraught with peril for customers because you may wind up paying more for the same services. If this worries you, and it should, I cannot recommend enough listening to Dean Bedwell's podcast on this topic you see on the right. And yes, this is an unabashed plug. Please check out our negotiation services that can help you overcome all the gotchas and save you money. But whatever you do, understand all these changes thoroughly. One last thing before we sum up. Satya and others have talked about evolving the current consumption-based model of cloud billing. And we all know how complex and arcane it is to a simpler, more elegant model based on tokens per watt per dollar. Satya says, this is him at the World Economic Forum last year, this will be a game-changing formula. And his thesis is just this. If you believe that in the future, all applications will be driven by and will output tokens are words or syllables, then these tokens should be the basis of both costs and billing. Reality here is somewhat different. The current cost structure is for Microsoft 365, it's based on seats. For Azure, it's based on consumption and utilization. Changing all this will be a monumental task, probably not too likely for a while. So, summing up, here are the strategic questions that we've seen in the presentation so far. Will enterprises truly realize ROI, or are we in a bubble? Can Microsoft prioritize appropriately and satisfy both the needs of OpenAI and the other AI priorities, as well as the core enterprise business, i.e. you? Can Microsoft sustain this first mover pace and keep up with all the startups that are happening in the AI world? Or is Microsoft competing in just too many spaces, risking dilution of its focus? And finally, will we be successful in cleaning up our data estate? Will it become that great enabler of AI, or will it slow it down? So, in all of this, what could possibly go wrong? Well, clearly, if we enter an economic downturn, maybe caused by the bursting of the AI hype bubble, slowing AI investments, that could be deleterious to Microsoft's ambitions. Or if there are technical innovations, new kinds of models, new kinds of hardware that make AI inferencing much, much cheaper and dilute the value of the investments that Microsoft's making in its Fairwater AI factories. If we see the disintermediation of the Microsoft flagship products, and we've already seen that with Windows a bit with Linux, how about with Office and Microsoft 365, as we've discussed? I personally don't think so, as I said, but it's possible. Finally, will customers accept the continuing and ongoing changes, usually increases, to the pricing models that we've seen so far? Alternatively, what could possibly go right? Could very well be that AI demand continues to grow, as many of the tech companies believe and hope, therefore justifying Microsoft's massive investments. And this, to be clear, this is their core bet for the company. What could go right? Microsoft adeptly juggles all their partners, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others that are innovating while continuing to create their own unique and valuable IP. Their economies of scale enable acceptable pricing, limiting the increases that are passed on to customers. And finally, somehow the Windows franchise is revitalized. So these are things that could go right. What do you think? Finally, this is our last slide. It's no surprise. This is going to be a big, consequential year for Microsoft, for the industry, and for you, filled with challenges and opportunities. You must pay close attention. And I can't emphasize this point enough. Give Microsoft and give all of your industry partners their feedback and guide them in the right direction to help you and to help others like you. And lastly, will all of these bets that we've talked about, will they pay off? And the answer really lies with you. If you accept them, if you adopt them, if you implement them, you will be the decider. And lastly, from the trenches of the AI revolution, thank you very much for your attention. I encourage all of you to become a member of Directions on Microsoft. Go to directionsonmicrosoft.com for information. And don't forget to check out our licensing boot camps if you're interested in discovering and understanding all the intricacies, complexities of how to license your Microsoft products with the end goal of saving some money. Come to our boot camp. Once again, thanks very much.